Using her profession to bring about positive changes in the community she's planning is all in a day's work for my next guest. I'm Mackenzie Oliver, and on this episode of Ready STEM Go, I'm speaking with Melanie Packer as she discusses her experiences and advice on navigating the property industry. Welcome, Melanie.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here today. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Melanie is a passionate town planning professional with more than 10 years experience in Queensland's public sector. She's made significant contributions to regional and metropolitan planning projects in the state, including in Toowoomba, Bundaberg, and here in Brisbane.
Mhm.
During her time at the Department of Transport and Main Roads, she joined the organisation as a graduate planner and now has progressed through into a senior planning position. Also, Melanie is returning to study part-time at QUT doing a Master of Data Science. So lots to talk about here on this episode. But before we kick off, Melanie, have you brought an epic, inspiring, or a crazy STEM fact or STEM story with you?
I have. Something that I find really cool is the fact that scientists are actually studying how birds fly together in a flock to inform how they get autonomous vehicles and drones to work together safely and not run into each other.
That's the goal. That's very cool.
Definitely.
Is something that do you think that we'll be able to see on Queensland roads anytime soon?
Maybe not in the next year, but maybe sometime soon. We've got a little while to go yet before I think that we can expect to see that on the roads.
Yes, but I did like the optimistic answer. I'm excited to hear. So diving in, you've done a lot of work with TMR across so many different projects in Queensland, like I said before, in Toowoomba, Bundaberg, and in Brisbane. So there's probably a bunch of different projects that you'd be able to talk to us about. What are some of the differences between working on maybe the projects in smaller communities versus like big city Brisbane?
I think the first thing that I found was because I started out as a graduate up in Townsville, was that because there was only 4 people in my team, I found it a lot easier to get involved in a lot wider range of projects and also higher level planning program issues because there's just a lot less people. And so it was just easier for my manager to bring me along to strategic planning meetings that he might be having with other high level managers than I would really get to do right now in my current job, because there's just a lot more of us here. So they really do have to pick and choose who can go along to these things. But I also found that was really good because I knew what everyone was doing and I could provide input into other people's projects a lot easier because there was only 4 of us, so we all kind of had to do a bit to make it all work together. Another thing that I found really cool was when I was living in Bundaberg, we had that record-breaking flood event in 2013 happened while I was working up there, and so because of that, there was emerging projects that came out to help with the community recovery. And because, again, there was only so many of us, I got to help manage some of those projects that I, again, probably wouldn't have had the experience here to do. So that was really cool. My current role now is quite different to that job because when I started out as a graduate, I was working in strategic planning, doing long-term planning from anywhere from, say, the next 10 years to the next 40. Whereas now I do development assessment planning where I'm looking at approving developments that might get, hopefully, if they want to get built within the next, say, 2 to 10 years. So I find that now I have a higher volume of work and the sorts of developments and things that I'm dealing with are a lot more complicated, which is for me really interesting because although you think it'd be nicer to just have an easy job, it's always the things that have crazy things going on that are actually the ones that get you engaged. And I just have a lot more exposure to those sort of very odd ideas that people come up with here in Brisbane than I would necessarily up in the regions.
So definitely exciting to hear that you've got some projects in the pipeline for the next 2 to 10 years for Brisbane. what is it like working on some of those projects?
Um, it's really interesting. At the moment, I'm working on a public transport project that's on a actual existing road, which is actually more complicated than just doing, say, a new railway line or a new busway in some ways, because you've got everyone else still wanting to use the road, and there's a lot of competition for road users to see who gets to get some space. So we're looking at trying to improve bus travel times along a certain road through Brisbane. We're also having with that access to public transport. So looking at how do you actually get from your house to the bus? Because I guess in planning in general, the last little bit of your journey at either end is actually sometimes the hardest bit to organise for, because you can put the bus wherever you like, but if people have to walk down a footpath that's not really a footpath or something, that's really where it can get complicated. So yeah, it's just really interesting to try and balance all the different road users and hopefully get some better bus travel times for people living in the outer suburbs into the CBD.
So yeah, it definitely sounds like you'll have to be thinking of a lot of different people, a lot of different parties, I guess. What might some of the skills be to have to think about the individuals using these systems, but also, I guess, the collective people as well?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you do have a lot of different people living along a corridor, and they might not be someone traveling in from right out at one end all the way into the city to go to work every morning. You've also got kids going to school, and you might have your grandma needs to go to the shop for bread and milk. So you've also really got to think about the really vulnerable road users, where that bus trip or the train journey is actually their way that they can get around, and they might not have access to a car. So, and I guess also for my project, we also have a university nearby. So we have a lot of students that are traveling in to go to uni. So yeah, you do have to kind of think about not just peak hour. You've got to think about the whole day. And if you're going to make a change, how is that going to disadvantage people as well as make it better for people?
So yeah, it sounds like you have to be thinking about a lot of different things. Is it helpful to have quite a number of people on the team? Do you work with a lot of people there? Tell me a bit more about who you might have involved with you.
Well, I directly have one of the other planners is supervising my work to make sure I'm making good decisions and informed decisions. But generally, the team is about 15 people, and for the most part, it's really good because if my supervisor isn't there to help, there's always someone else who might have done something similar in the past who can help answer questions. Also, more generally, there's a heap of different people in TMR who do this sort of work. So if I was getting really desperate, I'm sure I could call someone else somewhere else in the state who'd be able to answer my questions.
And it's like a big planning team as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's probably 10 people in the planning team, and then in the development assessment team, there's another 10 people. In the development assessment side of things, I actually work pretty autonomously and organize my own work from day to day, because I've been doing that work for quite a while. And so I don't necessarily need my supervisor to answer all my questions all the time, because I usually know the answer. But it is really good to have other people around me, and even people like the graduates in my team can sometimes answer questions because they might have come across something that I've never come across, or it might just be a judgment on whether something's reasonable. And so, yeah, it's, even though in that work I do work a lot by myself, it's really good to have a team environment, because when I'm trying to make a decision, sometimes you do just need a second opinion to see if you're actually doing something that's pretty reasonable and not something that is just because you're grumpy about some plan being very odd or something like that.
So like having that like myriad of perspectives when you're trying to plan for a community.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, sometimes people do come up with some interesting ideas, and so you do have to just get a second opinion to make sure you are just making the best decision, not only for the developer, but also for the people who live next door, or who might drive up and down the road every day, or who might have to walk across a very large driveway that has large trucks go across it, you want to make sure that those people are also getting a good outcome, not just the person who owns the block of land.
So yeah, you mentioned before that you've worked at TMR for quite some time now, starting off in a grad position and now you're a senior planner. So you've stuck with them for a long time. What's the environment like?
I have found that it's been a really good place to work. All my managers that I've ever had who've just been really, really good managers and very positive people. I didn't actually, when I came into TMR, didn't actually plan on being here for that long. I thought, oh, I've finished uni, maybe I'll be here for 3 years and then I'll move on and do something else that's more exciting. But because just the people I work with are so, just really decent people. And then through my career, I've come to realize how important transport is and how we can really have a big impact on the future of the community through transport. Because I remember when I was studying, I was really interested in things like sustainability and that sort of thing as subjects at uni, and I still think those are incredibly important. But transport is something that it doesn't matter whether we're doing remote work, you still need transport because you need to get your food. So it feels like something that you can have an interest in, those sort of environmental concerns and improving communities in a real way and in a really meaningful way, because it's just so important no matter where the world ends up in the future.
Yeah, like sounds like you can have such a strong influence no matter which outcome you're trying to provide. I guess so many different outcomes you're trying to provide for whoever's accessing it.
Yeah, exactly. And especially when I was working in the regions, when I was working in Townsville, we were working on a project that was looking at the transport needs for the Northwest Queensland community, which is not a very large community in terms of people, but the distances between towns are hundreds of kilometres. And so they're so reliant on the transport network to get goods and services that they might not actually have in town available to them all the time. So yeah, you can make a really big impact on not just the city, but regional communities are so reliant on transport as well.
So definitely a big spread of projects that you've worked across there, developing so many different skills. But now you're developing some more. You've jumped back into studies, Master of Data Science. How do you think that this is going to help in a position in planning?
I've always been interested in learning some more technical skills rather than being so word-based, I guess, because a lot of my work that I do now is very explaining things to people, really. And I work with a lot of people who are very good at the technical side of things, so I really wanted to learn more of that. But previously, I've used things like census data to inform future planning studies. And so that is something that I really think I would like to learn more about, how to analyze that sort of data and then other pieces of information to be able to help make informed decisions for future planning. Yeah, and I guess also I previously had studied bits and pieces of coding, computer coding, just in like free workshops that they do through different organizations over the last couple of years. And so I kind of had started to develop an interest in that sort of web development and things like that. And so the data analytics really just kind of brought together a bunch of different things that I'm interested in into one degree.
So yeah, you did mention there that using the census data was a big part of how you can involve data science with planning. Are there any other big data sets that you think that you would be able to use in a data science planning crossover position?
There really is. I mean, things like from as basic as, say, go-kart data, because especially now that we've got go-karts, we can tell where people are traveling from and to, which really can inform things like my current project that's looking at improving bus travel times. But also the customer service branch is really doing some interesting research into working out whether the services we deliver are actually achieving the outcomes that we actually set out to achieve rather than what we think we're achieving. So I think that's really helpful as well, because everyone who has had to try and get a driver's license knows how painful it can be to go to the Department of Transport and sit in that line and wait. I think it can be really useful to use that sort of data to work out how we can improve things like that to make people's experience actually line up with expectations.
Yeah, so that kind of, crossover between, what you said, what you think you're about to achieve versus the actual outcomes.
Yeah.
That'll be, an interesting spot to be able to kind of see that progress as well.
Yeah, because it's very easy working in any organization, working on something, and to think that you're going to achieve all these big things and if you don't talk to the people who are going to actually receive the service or the goods, think that you've come up with a really great product, and then actually it might just not be.
Yeah, and that's where data insights can really shine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and also then looking forwards to the future, is there anything that you're pretty excited for on the horizon? Any like positions or opportunities pop up? Where do you think you're going to be leading?
I'm not 100% sure at this point, because I've really only just started studying in the last semester, but I can see that there's a lot of different opportunities I could have within the department and even broader in the community using data analytics and data science. So I'm just really open to opportunities, I think. As I said, anything from customer service and customer insights to planning, even things like finance uses big data to work out those sort of decisions. So yeah, there's just a lot of different opportunities to see where I could end up.
Cool. So kicking open those doors in every direction you look.
Exactly.
So that's nearly all we have time for today. But before we wrap up, we'll ask you, knowing what you know now, what's something that you might go back and want to tell your younger self?
When I was finishing school, I didn't think I could necessarily have a job or a career in STEM, because I studied subjects like history and English, and the only science subject I did was biology, and I just did basic maths. But I think it's really good. I wish I'd understood that you don't have to make a decision about where your life is going to end up when you're 17 or 18. There's so many opportunities, and just studying what interests you makes such a difference in terms of where you end up, because there's no point studying something that you really struggle with and doesn't really interest you, that you might just end up in a career that's just not your thing. You're better off just actually studying what interests you and working hard at that and enjoying it.
Yeah, because you want to end up where you want to be. And I feel like you've definitely been a shining example of that as well.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the study sort of things, it's not just kids who study the advanced maths and physics and chemistry who can get into these courses and into these fields. You can do English and humanities kind of subjects. I did music as well, and still end up in a really interesting technical role and be working with really interesting projects.
100%. And I think that would be a very good takeaway for maybe some of our school age listeners as well. So that's all for today, for this episode of Ready STEM Go. Thank you for listening, and big thank you again today with Melanie Packer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And then to our listeners, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and never miss an upcoming episode. Join our Facebook group, QUT STEM is for me, and keep up to date with events and resources that you can access. Thanks, guys.